Hello, welcome to the First Aid for Business in Darwin. I hope you have a wonderful time at your seminar this afternoon. My name is Peter Towers and I'm the Managing Director of ESS BIZTOOLS, ESS BizGrants and ESS Small Business. And I'm happy to be able to make this presentation to you today as part of the celebration of the launch of Jeff Goodrich's new business, BIZTOOLS NT. So welcome. I'm going to ask you to share with me on some of our material relative to a very important issue that's now very much applicable in Australia, and that is the crowdsource funding equity raising. So we're about to bring that so you can view that. So today we're going to look at crowdsource funding equity raising. What's all the excitement about? And there is a lot of excitement. I've just finished some interviews with one of the companies that has raised a substantial amount of capital using crowdsource funding, and 4 of the intermediaries. And I'm going to explain who intermediaries are a little bit later on. And we're also going to have a brief overview of the Personal Property Securities Register. And if you are in business and you are not seriously looking at the Personal Property Securities Register, I think you should, because unfortunately, some people around Australia have lost their businesses, lost everything, because they had not registered on this government register. But let's start off with crowdsource funding, equity raising. This is for small proprietary companies. The legislation was changed in 2018. It's also targeted at inventors. And from the 19th of October 2018, small proprietary companies have been able to raise capital direct from the public. The intermediaries have been appointed by the Australian Security Investment Commission, and they are active in the marketplace. Intermediaries are the people who the government has entrusted to be the gatekeepers on this process, but they also wear a promoter's hat in that they are promoting these companies to their investors. We've started this document we're producing, which we call the Crowdsource Funding Scorecard. And there's been some success. There's been $22.1 million raised by 27 companies as of the 20th of February. We're about to produce the March figures. There's no security required. You're not borrowing money. There's no personal guarantees. Just again, you're not borrowing money. And there's no monthly repayments. Sounds great, doesn't it? Let's have a look at some of the companies that have been able to raise capital. One was a 100% digital bank that has raised $5 million. A craft brewery, a gin manufacturer, a manufacturer of premium socks and underwear. They raised $360,000. A digital platform that matches moviegoers with empty seats. An investment in a gaming brand, a leading soccer brand that was producing soccer balls and soccer clothing. This represents a great improvement. In fact, I think this is the greatest improvement in financing for small business and medium-sized enterprises in Australia in the last 35 years. That's a big statement, but the biggest improvement in business financing. 35 years ago, Paul Keating, as Treasurer in the Hawke government, introduced what a lot of accountants call Section 708, and that enables companies, private companies, to be able to raise capital of a maximum of 2 million, but from no more than 20 investors. So it's got its uses, but it's not nearly as good as crowdsource funding is. Let's have a look at how you qualify, because you're probably sitting there now saying, yippee, I don't want to have to go and mortgage my house, or maybe it's your mother-in-law's house, to borrow more money from the bank. Well, you might fit the requirements. Unfortunately, not everyone will, and obviously not everyone wants to go down this process. But the group turnover or sales has to be under $25 million per annum. A couple of key words there. If you're part of a group, it's the group figures that come into play, not just your company that might have a $2 million turnover on its own. It would have been eligible. But if you're part of a group that's got a $30 million turnover, unfortunately, you cannot use crowdsourced funding. And the group gross asset value has to be under $25 million. That's your land and buildings, plant and equipment, motor vehicles, stock, debtors, has to be less than $25 million. And you cannot be listed on a stock exchange anywhere in the world and not included on a financial market. And the other test says you just can't accumulate the money. So there's only 5 tests. And a lot of you sitting there today are probably saying, gee, we could qualify on that. Well, let's look at some of the other things. I think it's important that you realize that you can be any type of business. There's no restrictions unless there's a legal restriction on a certain profession or business being operated by a company. And there's no age specification. So you could be a startup, although it might be a little bit difficult to convince the investors that your company is going to be successful. But you could be a 95-year-old company that's wanting to go further. So let's look at the amount of capital. I think I mentioned this before. I gave it away. You can raise up to $5 million in a 12-month period, and you can combine it with a Section 708 capital raising. So that can mean that you could do a seed capital raising first, which, to be honest, most intermediaries seem to want people to do. And then once you've got a group of people who normally would know the company, they would be customers, suppliers, or employees, would form up to 20 investors. That's going to help prove the value that a group of people who understand your business have agreed to put in $500,000 for a 10% equity or whatever it might be. And then the company could go to the market very confident that you might be then able to raise, say, $1 million using crowdsourced funding. Let's have a look at the legislation. The offer must be made by the platform of a approved intermediary. There are 13 intermediary businesses that have been licensed by ASIC, and they must hold an Australian Financial Services license, which authorises them to undertake this work that they act as the gatekeeper for ASIC, but also the promoter on behalf of their investors. The key document that has to be produced, and you will need assistance from your accountants to undertake this task, is the crowdsourced funding offer document, which is a de facto prospectus. And all money that is going to be paid, even if it's off the managing director's favourite aunt, has to be processed via the intermediary's website, because every investor must acknowledge that they have read the investment warning. That's the law, and intermediaries have been told they have to enforce this. The maximum period you can have on the intermediary's website is 3 months. You can have a lesser period if you like. My suggestion to anyone I'm talking to is always take the 90 days. If you raise your stated capital sum within the 90 days, that's okay. That's the end of it then. But you cannot extend beyond 90 days. The maximum amount that a retail investor, and a retail investor is anyone who is not a sophisticated investor, and a sophisticated investor is someone who gets a certificate from their accountant that they have net asset values of $2.5 million or more, or for the last 2 years had a gross income for taxation purposes of at least $250,000. The rest of the people are considered to be retail investors, and the maximum investment is $10,000 per company per 12 months. Retail investors are also entitled to a 5 business day cooling off period after they sign the share application form and pay the money to the intermediary. If they change their mind, the intermediary has got to destroy the application form and refund the capital that's been paid. Now, if you need any more information, this is primarily now for accountants and bookkeepers and business advisors. If you're there, please go to our website, www.essbiztools.com.au. Jeff and his team will be able to help you on doing that, and we'll be able to give you some further assistance. But we have a very detailed Learn More that's available to assist you with understanding how crowdsourced funding works, and the product package that we have developed that is now being used by accountants all over Australia to help you work with your clients to be able to implement crowdsourced funding. And your investment, if you are an accountant, to subscribe to this product is normally $999 for 12 months, 24/7 access, including GST. We have a special discount to celebrate the appointment of Jeff Goodrich's team at BIZTOOLS NT. We're offering a 40% discount. So that's reducing the price to only $599, including GST. Or you could invest in our gold package. Our gold package includes everything that ESS BIZTOOLS produce. We have 22 other product packages in a range of things. So it's worth having a look at. That normally has a discounted price of $2,970, including GST. We're taking 40% off to celebrate Jeff's coming on board with us, and you can therefore obtain a gold subscription if you're an accountant, bookkeeper, business advisor, consultant, etc., for $1,782, including GST. If you want some more information, you can go onto our website, essbiztools.com.au, and look at the blogs and accountants minute articles. And we have a whole range of articles there that we have written over the last 12 months on crowdsourced funding and a whole host of other matters. We produce it nearly every week. Now, if you're a small business or a medium-sized business and you're saying, hey, I'd like to know a bit more about all this, you can go onto our separate small business website, www.esssmallbusiness.com.au, crowdsource funding, learn more, where we have got information there for you so that you will get a better understanding of how this works. And there's some free material there. And you could also look at the articles we've produced, which are in blogs stroke empowering SMEs, because that's the newsletter we produce for businesses. And this is targeted at company directors, managers, shareholders, business operators, because currently you might be a business that's not a company thinking about crowdsourced funding. You can then transfer your business, but see your accountant before you do this, please, into a corporate structure. And you could then be eligible to go down the crowdsourced funding path. There's a 40% discount on various information which we have on crowdsourced funding that's available for businesses, and you'll see that if you go onto the ESS Small Business website. So that's it for crowdsourced funding. If you're watching this video, Jeff's now going to contact me, and we're going to answer any of your questions. So I look forward to hearing your questions shortly. I now want to move into Personal Property Securities Register. What is it? I'd be curious if I was there to see how many of you know about it. It's a public register where security interests over personal property may be registered and searched. This legislation's now been going for 7 years. And over that 7-year period, I've had a number of people from all walks of life, all professions, say to me, well, why are you getting excited about personal property? Well, you'd have to ask the government of the day, who are not the government at present, why this was called personal property. But it's really business property. It doesn't apply to land or a fixture on the land, though. But it applies to just about everything else. It's all forms of property. other than real estate. It's a vast range of business property. So why the government called it personal property, I don't know, but they did. So what's the risk? If you haven't registered an asset which you own, which is not in your possession, so it could be stock that's stored at someone else's premises in a warehouse, and an insolvency event is committed by the owner of that warehouse, you could basically lose that stock or those assets that you have stored at that other business's premises or other person's premises. It can also cover debtors, because people owe you money. It could also cover risks that contractors have through receiving liquidators' preferential payment claims, and that is what has wrecked a lot of people because they had not registered whoever they had their contract with on the Personal Property Securities Register. It doesn't cost much. In fact, it's probably the cheapest insurance going. $6 for a 7-year registration. So the first batch of 7-year registrations are now finishing because this legislation started in January 2012. So a warning, if you were diligent and you did have a cover taken out 7 years ago, if it was a 7-year period, it's now either expired or getting close to expiring, depending on what date you took it out. My recommendation, revisit whoever you had registered, a customer or someone where you've got assets stored or you're contracting with, because if you're still conducting business with that organisation, you probably still need the cover, but you've now got to re-register. I'd hate to think that you had covered yourself for 7 years and then didn't renew, and then an unfortunate event occurred, an event that really none of us can foretell, and then you can be in a lot of financial strife because you lose that asset. The liquidator claims it. You can also get a registration that there's no end date. It goes forever. It want to be a pretty long-term contract, but some people have these, of course, and that will cost you $115. When did all this start? I've already told you, 28th of January 2012. And unfortunately, thousands of small and medium-sized business operators and some big businesses, as we're going to see shortly, don't seem to know anything about it. And that's very risky. This is like quicksand for businesses. So what's happened so far? Well, $450 million at least has been lost by Australian businesses because they had not registered on the government register. And those businesses were primarily from small and medium-sized businesses. I think you should be asking your accountants if you've got stock that's stored at various locations, if you've got assets that's stored at various locations, if you've got contracts with people where you're getting progress payments. They're the risk areas that have now been clearly established under this legislation. You should be asking your accountants to do a review of your systems to make sure that you are diligent in registering companies, customers, or businesses that there could be a problem with. Now, if you're dealing with a major corporation, you probably are not going to register them because you have to get the company's signature as well. But the even so-called well-run public companies can get into financial difficulties, and unfortunately, we've seen that over the years, haven't we? You wouldn't register at a government department, but just make sure that if you're dealing with someone that's a spin-off of a spin-off that claims to be government, that they really are, because perhaps they're not. It might just be a private company that the government's not going to stand by. So my recommendation is that you have a good look at what's going on and get your registrations up to date. It's a hard fact to swallow, but some people have lost all their business assets and their houses because they lost a substantial asset through not registering on this register. I was told of a situation in Victoria whereby a kitchen manufacturer had made 12 kitchens worth about $70,000 or $80,000 each and put them into a display village, and then signed an agreement with the owner of the display village to receive monthly payments for 3 years, and then there was to be some sort of balloon payment paid out. Unfortunately, the cabinet maker had not heard of the Personal Property Securities Register and had not registered the business that he was dealing with. A liquidator got appointed to that developer. The liquidator seized the kitchens. 12 times $70,000 or $80,000, $840, nearly $1 million worth of kitchens were seized. And then 6 or 7 weeks later, they received a letter from the liquidator claiming there had been preferential payments made to them relative to the rental payments. The allegation obviously being that the cabinet maker had been putting pressure on the developer to make sure that they got their monthly payments. And the liquidator's claim was obviously that other people had not been receiving their payments. That claim was $115,000. Very, very disappointing. That business collapsed. You wouldn't want that to happen to your business, would you? But the single biggest claim in Australia that I can ascertain has been around $70 million. And that was for a dispute in Western Australia involving a subsidiary of General Electrics. General Electrics are one of the top 100 companies in the world. They fought it to the full court of the New South Wales Supreme Court and lost because they had not appropriately registered an asset that they had placed on a property in the Western Australian mining areas. $70 million. So it can happen to the very big players as well as small, medium-sized businesses. Now, the $70 million didn't wipe out General Electrics, but a sum of money can really wipe out small, medium enterprises. Contractors, you're primarily suspect through progress payments, and I've referred to those before, the example of the cabinet maker. And businesses that have got assets stored on someone else's premises, you're the ones that are really at risk on this. Please get advice. I'm just going to show you a document which we've prepared, which will assist you in identifying the personal property, and will give you a bit of an idea of what's included in this. This is a document which is part of the accountant's package. So I hope you can read it okay. So it starts off looking at stock. Where was all your stock? And we've broken it into various components. What about livestock and crops? There's been a major case in New Zealand, and we copied their legislation on Personal Property Securities Register, where a former racehorse, a stallion, was standing at stud at a property, and they hadn't made their payments. And there was an insolvency event. The liquidator seized the horse. It went to the New Zealand High Court for clarification, and the New Zealand High Court ruled that the liquidator was entitled to seize that horse for the benefit of the bank, which was the secured creditor. I said at the beginning, I have great difficulties with this legislation. There's special provisions for crops, which you could look at. There's all sorts of other goods, that you might be able to look at and think about. It can apply to artist works. It can apply to plant and equipment. It can apply to plant and equipment. There was some changes from the 20th of May 2017. It can apply to motor vehicles. It can apply to boats and other types of water craft. It can apply to aircraft, and so it goes on. And we've got a detailed process there which assists accountants to sit down and do a review so they can ascertain where all these assets were at a particular time. If you need more information for accountants, bookkeepers, business advisors that are in the audience, please go to www.essbiztools.com.au and click on PPSR Due Diligence Review, then click on Learn More, and we've got some overviews there of what the problem is and how we've gone about producing a product package to assist those type of people, accountants, etc., to be able to answer the problem. You can subscribe separately to that if you wish for 12 months, $550, or you can subscribe to the gold package of ESS BIZTOOLS that Personal Property Securities Register is included in, as well as the crowdsourced funding. There is a 40% discount on at present, so you can obtain that for $1,782. Small businesses can go to www.esssmallbusiness.com.au, library, and then PPSR, and there's some articles there. Some are free, you can have those. And there's a couple of other articles on PPSR that are $22 each. So you can download those. We're very proud to have appointed Jeff Goodrich and his team at BIZTOOLS NT as our representatives in the Northern Territories. Most of you know Jeff. His general manager is Grant Lindsay. Marketing manager is Sam Greason. Their web address is www.biztoolsnt.com.au, and you can send emails to jeff@greatbusiness.com.au, and there's his telephone number. Please give him a ring and keep him busy in this new venture of theirs. If you want to contact anyone at ESS BIZTOOLS, there's our details of telephone numbers, emails, and websites. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you today. I look forward to now hearing the questions on Personal Property Securities Register. Have a great day.